Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Music Podcast once again. I so appreciate my return visitors and my subscribers. If you are not a subscriber, please consider hitting that button. I have a great guest with me today, Mr. Gary Pihl. That name will ring bells for many classic rock fans, as Gary has spent around 8 years in Sammy Hagar's band, right in the meat of that catalog, too. And that was before joining Boston, where he's coming up on nearly 40 years with the band. Incredible. During many of those years, he and Sammy Hagar drummer David Lauser made great music as part of the band Alliance. So Gary and David, along with Robert Barry, are still at it. And Alliance has just released its sixth album, which is also incredible. The album is called Before Our Eyes, and it's available now on Frontier's music label. Gary, it is an absolute honor to have you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Scott, for taking the time to talk to me.
Absolutely. It is a real honor. I see all this stuff, and it's like you've spent so many years in so many of these things, and that's odd. A lot of guys, they come in for a year or two, do an album or two, and then kind of move on. What do you think keeps you? Is it part of your personality? Do you like to settle in and stay? What do you think that is that makes you stay for so long with these projects?
Uh, I guess, yeah, it's just my personality, Yeah, when you got a good thing, don't mess it up. Stick with it.
Yeah.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Uh,
I'll even go out on a limb and say, same thing with my marriage. We just celebrated our 49th wedding anniversary.
Bless
And,
you, man. That is
and we met 10 years before that in high school. So
wow. Yeah.
I've known this woman a long time.
It's pretty great. It's pretty great. And I know how that is because I'm coming up on 34. So, it's
That's right.
it is a beautiful thing, for sure. And these bands are kind of like marriages. That's what I'm
Oh,
told.
yeah.
So yeah, it is your personality, and we are thankful for it because you're great additions to all of these legendary acts. I mean, these albums that you're a part of are just all this music crazy.
I feel very blessed to have been in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
People ask me, how'd you get the gig with Sammy? I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area in a band called Crossfire, and we had the two Froome brothers, David and Mitchell Froome.
Yeah.
Of course, Mitchell has gone on to produce terrific acts, Paul McCartney, Crowded House, The Pretenders, Elvis Costello, Bonnie Raitt, goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
So I thought we had a really good band, but we were looking for a singer, and Sammy had just left Montrose at the time. And so he said, well, I don't, I'm not looking to join a band, but I am looking for a guitar player. And so I thought, well, gee, I don't want to leave these guys. But our manager said, well, why don't you go try out for them anyway, just see what happens. And so Sammy called, so I got his number, blah, blah. I called him and he said, well, Pihl, you're not into drugs, are you? I said, no, absolutely not. He said, well, why don't you come down and jam with us? Because I found out later that his previous guitar player had OD'd on cocaine in the bathroom of a gas station. So I tell this story to young musicians thinking, because they think, oh, it's sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right?
Yeah.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
So I go down to audition with Sammy. I'm there jamming with the band. And Sammy's manager calls and says, hey, there was a gig with Queen and Thin Lizzy. Queen canceled. Thin Lizzy's going to headline. You guys could be the opening act if you have a guitar player. So, of course, Sammy turns to me and said, hey, can you do the gig? It's in 2 days. And, of course, I said, yeah, sure, I can do it. So we went home and practiced all the Sammy songs. And we did a great show, got a couple of nice reviews from it. But even then, I thought I was just kind of like filling in at the last minute for somebody else. And so I was saying goodbye to Bill Church, the bass player. Mm-hmm. And he says, no, you're in the band.
That's a great feeling, man. And
of course, with Sammy, that's how I got to know the guys in Boston. Our manager knew their manager. We opened up the end of their first tour in '77 and their entire second tour, '78 through '79. And so that's when I got to meet Tom Scholz and Brad Delp and all the other guys in the band. And so when Tom heard that Sammy left our band to join Van Halen, he called me to ask if I would play on the last song to be recorded for their third album. And I said, absolutely, yeah. So I left from our last gig with Sammy, which was Farm Aid 1 in Champaign, Illinois,
So
and flew
cool.
directly to Boston to start working with Tom on this one last song. But after I'd been there a couple of weeks, he said, gee, I think we've worked well together. Why don't you stick around? We'll finish the album and maybe we'll tour if people still want us or not. And well, so that's it. I've been here 40 years.
Yeah, yeah, stick around for a little while. Pretty great, pretty great. Yeah, Falling in Love from the Street Machine album had a lot of the Boston guys on it. Brad Delp was on there, and Barry and Sib, I think, on
Right.
that. And Tom Scholz, this is the what I've researched, set to produce the Danger Zone album
That's
for
right.
Sammy.
Yeah.
Wow.
He came out to California because, of course, that's where we were living. And we went through about a week's worth of rehearsals, with him there, working up the songs and the arrangements and this and that. But then he got a call from his record label that said, you can't produce anybody else until you make the next Boston album. And so he got to leave.
Yeah, those Boston albums were a little scarce. There's not a lot of them out there, you know.
Right.
Uh, so yeah, I get that. Tom is just what a mind. It's got to be incredible to work around him.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when they put together those lists of 100 greatest guitar players of all time, he's on there. But
Yeah,
he's also on the list of 100 greatest, what did I say, keyboard? Guitar, anyway, guitar and keyboard.
yeah,
The guy that's on both those lists of 100 greatest, guitar and keys. And then, of course, 100 greatest songs, More Than a Feeling or a few others
wow.
show up, producer. He designed the amplifiers that we still use on stage. So yeah, he's a really special guy. And I'm, again, so lucky to just to be around him to see how he does it all.
It's pretty cool. It's a great story. It really is. Um, the press photos and the band members that I usually see associated with Alliance, yourself, Robert Barry, and David Lauser.
Yeah, of
Uh, but I see Fitz's name everywhere. Alan Fitzgerald, of course,
course.
playing keyboards. Is it a regular thing to have him there? Is it, sometimes he makes it, sometimes he doesn't? I feel like he's kind of a permanent member of Alliance.
Well, I wish I could say that he's going to be here forever, but obviously he started with us when we were putting the band together. Uh, I'll go back to the Sammy days. So Dave and I were in Sammy's band,
Mhm.
and Fitz was in the Sammy band with me, when I first joined, blah, blah, blah. Then he left to, of course, start Night Ranger,
Yep.
but we kept in touch because we're all friends, right? And so so Sammy, leaves our band to join Van Halen. And he said, you guys are a great band. All you need is another singer to take my place, and you guys should keep going. And so we were on Geffen Records at the time, and we got Robert Barry's name from Geffen. And so we said, okay, great, let's put that together. So we got together with Robert. That's how the band was formed
Wow.
because, again, it was us Sammy Hagar band members, and
Yeah.
then again Robert Barry. But so Fitz was still working with Night Ranger, and of
Mhm.
course at that point I was still working with Boston, because this was a couple of years later, right?
Right.
And after I had done the third stage album and tour with Boston, Tom Scholz said, "It's going to be 4 years before the next record comes out. So if you got any other side projects you want to do, now's the time to do them." And so that's when I said, "Oh, I'm going to get together with my old buddies and put
Yeah.
together a band." And so that's how Alliance was formed at that time. So long story short, Fitz, had a wonderful career. Played keys with Dan Fogelberg and some other people,
Yeah.
but he's in essence he's retired now.
Okay.
So I wish I could say he'd be back with us, but yeah, he's
Yeah.
not.
Okay, okay, yeah, that's it's so cool to see his name because huge Montrose fan, and Night Ranger, I love that stuff. So and seeing his name there is it's a comfort. It's what I grew up, I grew up with his work. So it was really nice to see him active. But he is retired and hopefully doing well and enjoying retirement. So that's
And of
good too.
course, he played bass with Montrose, but keys with the Sammy Hagar band, and obviously keys with Night Ranger as well. He's a terrific bass player. I
Wow.
almost think he's a better bass player than he is a keyboard player.
Wow. Crazy. It's cool. It's cool. Now we mentioned Night Ranger. You worked with Night Ranger, right? They recorded at your studio. They recorded their first demo with you, right?
Absolutely, in the living room of my house.
They weren't even Night Ranger at that time, right? They were Ranger.
Right. Yeah, they were trying to come up with a name. And at first they came up with the name Ranger. And they said, oh, we found out there was some other band called the Rangers or something. We're going to call them up and tell them, hey, they got to quit. They got to change their name. So Jack Blades was telling me about it. I said, yeah, we called them. I said, when did you guys, change your name to Rangers? Because I think we might have had it first. And the guy says, well, my grandfather started the band in 1935. And Jack said, okay, thanks, we'll change it. But obviously, because I knew Fitz from the Sammy days,
Right.
and so he introduced me to the other guys, and I had a little bit of recording equipment in my living room at my house, and my wife was kind enough to let me record friends over there, and so they came over and recorded a bunch of demos, one of which was Sister Christian, and they got a record. I even mixed live sound for them a few times. They had showcase people coming in to see them, and I mixed sound for them. So just trying to do whatever I could to help them out, and didn't charge them anything for recording. But, just do it because I love the music.
Yeah, and that's so cool. Good friends, and it's what it's all about. It's they've done pretty well for themselves.
Yeah,
Yeah, you started them off well.
yeah.
Some really cool guitar stuff going on this Alliance record. It's really, really creative, inventive, in the Tom Scholz kind of style where, you never know what you're going to get. Different sounds, and I'm listening to this thing, and one of the songs, there's many songs, but one of the songs, Joan of Arc,
Oh,
um, couple of guitar parts at the end of that song that they're layered on top of each other, and they just go like they feel like they go in different directions, but it works. It's just crazy. They mesh so well. When you were doing that, is that something you've done before? Was that an experimental thing? Or, how do you get that to work? One is manic and the other one is just kind of layering in there, and they work. Tell me about that a little bit.
well, I have used that technique before, but it's always different every time you do it. Because you're never quite sure. You got an idea for this, and then an idea for that, and sometimes they work, and sometimes they don't.
Well, that one works. It's pretty great. It's pretty great. And one of the more interesting guitar parts, nothing can make you change. And I'm listening to it, and Howard Leese is a friend, and I've talked to him before, and his trademark on every album he does is a backward guitar part.
Yeah,
And I heard that solo in Nothing Can Make You Change. It's got to be backwards, right?
absolutely.
It is. Okay. I'm listening to it a couple times over, and I thought, that sounds backwards. That has it reminded me of Howard. And and then I watched the video, and you got the little rewind in the corner of the video, and I
Uh,
thought, that's the guitar going backwards, isn't it? Pretty great.
that's it. And of course, back in in Sammy days, we did that once or twice. Where in those days you flipped the tape over because that's how you had to do it.
Right.
You got it, and you tried to play along with the drums that sounded like. which was really hard to do.
Yeah.
These days, you just play along with it, and then you hit the button on the computer that says reverse.
It's pretty good, huh?
But still, you got to plan ahead because, of course, what you do at the beginning is really going to be at the end. So
Right.
you can't just play it and it magically has that sound. You got to plan where this is going.
Yeah. And that's got to be, it's got to make it fun, especially for a veteran like yourself. I mean, have you done everything? Just about, right? So this has to be a creative outlet to do something different. Even though you've been doing this that long, it's renewed, right? I mean, it's got to be.
That's it. And I love working with the other guys,
Yeah,
and we like to work together in the same room. These
that's
days
cool.
we could email stuff back and forth, but
Right.
it's not the same. We get in the same room, and for instance, I'll have a guitar riff idea, and Dave says, "Oh, I got a good drum groove that'll work with that." And Robert said, wait, I got some lyrics here that might fit with that." And we
That's so cool.
start playing, hit record, we start playing, and we end up writing a 4-minute song in 4 minutes.
It's pretty great, man. I mean, and that I love that same room thing. There is just something when you look at flesh and blood and somebody's eyes and you hear that sound, whatever that might be played live, without being transferred through the cyber optics and all that. There's just something about, even when I'll walk into a restaurant and there'll be live music instead of, something playing or, and there's a feeling, there's a warmth, there's it's a magical thing that happens. And I think it comes through, in the finished product for sure.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Dave Lauser, our drummer, is such a great arranger that, we'll be working on a song and he'll tell me, he said, "Ooh, what would be great here? Hit a big power chord, minor right here, go bang." And some people would say, "What? You let the drummer tell you how to play guitar?" Absolutely, because I know he's right.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
No egos involved. It's like, hey, if this works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Yeah, it's so cool. And I think back, you and David with Sammy, and I'm such a huge fan of that music. And I think just Standing Hampton and Three Lock Box, that 1-2 punch there is just wow. And that's not even counting all the rest. But wow, I mean, just so powerful, so classic, and just so memorable. It lives with me every day of my life.
Those are some of the greatest times we had together, being on stage with Sammy. And of course, we were building the career. Every album was bigger than the next, and Sammy was our best cheerleader. He said, "Next album is going to be even bigger, and we'll play bigger places." And it was. Every year was better than the previous one. And so we were sorry to see that end.
Yeah, I bet. I
Yeah,
bet.
had a great time with him there.
Yeah. And I've gone to see Sammy many times, and it's got to be the most fun experience that I've ever been to. I've been to thousands of shows, but
Yeah,
nothing's.
yeah, that's it. Sammy is what you see is what you get. He's always in a good mood. You meet him for 5 minutes, and he's your best friend.
It's so cool. And I see him now, and mid 70s now, I think he is. And wow, it's just still the energy, and he's just still a bunch of fun, and it's great. It's really great. I love to see veterans like yourself and Sammy, not um discouraged by the climate of the music industry. It's great because I think a lot of veterans that have been doing it a long time, the digital age, it doesn't pay like the streaming doesn't pay, and
Yeah.
there's a lot to be discouraged about, I guess. It's a
A
different
different world
world.
out there, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. But you guys are enjoying what you do and doing it for the love of it. And that's great to see. It really is. Face of Justice. Another one that really sparked my interest so much. In a span of like 30 seconds, we get an electric, we get an acoustic, and we get like a banjo, maybe a dobro. It's incredible, and that works too. I'm thinking, okay, how many directions can it go in? it's different sounds so close together, but yet it works. Uh, I mean, again, when you're doing something like that, do you question whether that will work?
Well, yes, but we'll try it anyway, right? And
It's
sometimes they don't work, right? We'll try something like, oh, how about if we do this? Nah, that's just not quite it. But we'll try anything. And again, that's just who we are. We're not afraid to try it. And Robert, of course, is a great keyboard player, guitar player, bass player, drummer, and as well as being a terrific singer. So he comes from the whole gamut. And again, Dave, terrific arranger, as well as being a great drummer. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so great. It's so much fun to listen to, because again, you don't know what you're gonna get, and it all works. I don't know how you get it to work, but it works. It's crazy. Um, if you wanted to do something like that, creative, in the Boston realm, with Tom, is it a different world for you than Alliance? I'm sure it's very different than Alliance, but in bouncing ideas like that, or does Tom come in and I mean, I know he's how much of a perfectionist he is and how much of a master player, songwriter, engineer, and everything he is. Does he come in with a finished piece for you and there's not too much discussion? Or is it, would you throw an idea like that, putting different things in there?
Yeah, he's definitely open to ideas. Now, of course, he's got his own ideas, how he's
Right,
writing the song as it's progressing. And so he'll have a lot of it done usually before I see it. And so he'll say, here, do something in this section. And so,
yeah,
okay, here, I'll try this.
right,
And usually he likes what I do. But like, for instance, with Sammy, when I joined his band, Sammy said right away, I'm the songwriter here. And that's the way it's going to be because I've got my own vision of what I want to do.
right,
But when it came time to the studio, it's like, go ahead, do whatever you want. Here's the song, here are the chords and all that, and
right,
make up your own parts. And so it was nice enough. So it wasn't like, here, do this exactly what I'm telling you to do. But
right,
same with Tom, like, yeah, do whatever you want. And live is the same way. There are a few songs live. Obviously, the hits, we want to play them very much like the record.
right.
But in a song like Walk On, that's a long song that's got solos in the middle of it.
Hmm.
Tom says, go for it, do whatever you want, so it could be different every night. And there are, there's a bass solo and that happens and drums and stuff that aren't on the album at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely open to creativity. Like, hey, if it's working, keep going.
Yeah, and that, there's fire in that. There's lightning in a bottle kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of trust, for sure. There's a reason you're in that band for almost 40 years. You know, he trusts you to on those solos, you're going to come up with something great. And same with the Sammy thing, he it's his song. He doesn't, he trusts somebody not to ruin it. So, it's pretty great to be in those situations and be that skilled to add to those things, because Boston is so, man, it's complex. It's a real work of art. It's crazy.
We did some gigs with the Doobie Brothers, and Pat came up to me one night and said, how do you remember all those parts?
Yeah, seriously.
The guitar. I said, I don't know. We just do.
Yeah, you just don't try not to think about it, right?
Yeah.
Is there any plan for new music from Boston? Will we see that?
Well, Tom's always working on new music.
Yes.
He's a
Okay.
musician. That's what he does.
Okay.
And of course, next year will be the 50th anniversary of the first album. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we'll tour, do some dates or whatever. And I'd love to have some new material to play on those shows as well. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Um, you come into Sammy's band. You come in the musical Chairs album, I think, right, with Sammy. In that album, he has, well, that band, Bill Church, um, and
Denny Carmassi.
Denny Carmassi, right. Yours, the Ronnie Montrose part.
It was
Uh,
Ronnie's band without Ronnie.
right.
So,
So,
I mean,
when you come in, did you feel that pressure of filling shoes kind of thing? Or, did he say anything to you to, hey, I want, Gary Pihl, or, or opposite of that, I want to stick to a Ronnie type of playing, or and what was your personal feeling?
yeah. No, Sammy never said a word like, you better pay attention to what Ronnie played because that's what I'm expecting to hear.
Right, right,
No, I mean, of course, we need to play the song. Here's the riff,
right,
But yeah, he never said anything like, I don't think you're quite doing as good as Ronnie would. No, it's like,
right.
yeah, do what you want. And so that was a wonderful thing.
Yeah,
And, uh,
and that
so
took that pressure away from.
that's what made it fun. So, but yeah, it was all the other guys. Obviously, Fitz again played keys with us, even though he played bass with Montrose.
Right. Yeah, so I would imagine that took a lot of pressure. You had to feel some pressure from going into the band that okay, I hope he likes what I got for him because it's going to be different, or uh, so I would imagine that was comforting to hear for sure.
Yes, absolutely. The fact that again those first couple of shows that I did with him, we got good reviews. They mentioned, oh, and a good guitar player, Gary Pihl. And I was like, okay, that's great.
Yeah, that's pretty
So
awesome. Yeah,
if they would have said I sucked, I probably wouldn't be there very long.
well, and those are huge shoes. Not that you filled those shoes, but those are huge
Yeah.
shoes to move aside and fit into. Take their place, kind of thing. Uh, there's a lot to be expected, and there's a reason you stayed there for so long. For sure. Um, you did a band called The Rhodes
Yeah.
with Mick Devine. In November of 22, you guys released an incredible album, Simple Man. That's 3 years ago. Are there any plans to follow up that record? Are you doing anything
Almost
there?
done with our next one.
Look at that. Fantastic.
Of course, the way that got put together was our first, Alliance records were on Escape Records from England, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the president of the company, Khalil, called me and said, "Gee, are you Well, first he wanted me to play on somebody else's song, and I said, "Oh, okay, yeah, just like come in and play some parts to this song." I said, "Okay, sure." So he sent me the song, and I listened to it, and I said, "Well, I'm glad to play it." And the demo he sent me was fine. Whoever was playing guitar did a great job. I said, but if I were going to play guitar, I'd like to change the arrangement a little bit. Like I think it should go halftime for the verse and then full time for the chorus, right? And I said, but that means changing the drums. I said, so who played drums on this? I said, oh, that's Josh Devine. He's the guy that played with the boy band One Direction. I said, oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, I'm not necessarily a huge One Direction fan,
Right.
but the drums were, happening. And so he said, yeah, why don't you talk to Josh? And I said, okay, sure. So I talked to him and, wonderful kid. And he said, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. I got it. Yeah. Halftime, boom, ba, and then double, boom, ba, ba, for the chorus. And
Yeah.
I'm all over that. That's great. And he said, you're my dad's age. I wonder if you guys would like to do any projects together. I said, oh, maybe. Sure. And so that's how I got to meet his dad, Mick Devine.
Yeah.
And so, we were talking on the phone and I'm telling him, I said, well, I've got some guitar riffs. And I said, I bet you have some vocal melodies or chords or songs or whatever that you'd like to do. He said, yeah, there is, I did a couple of songs with a Nordic band, like kind of death metal, kind of stuff.
Okay.
It didn't really turn out the way I wanted. Maybe we could start on those. And I said, okay, great. So I'm expecting he's going to send me those songs and I'll just, think about what would I do differently or whatever.
Right.
No, he sends me the vocal track alone. just the vocal, no metronome, no
Whoa.
guitar, no piano, just da 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 da. Like I had no idea what tempo it was, what key it
Wow.
was, what the chords ought to be. And I'm thinking, man, I have never worked like this before, but I'm up to the challenge. Well, I think this is what the tempo should be, and I think this is the groove, and I think these chords will fit with that melody. I don't know, but it sounds like they work to me. And of course, I sent that back to him. He said, "Oh, that's great." And Khalil, the president of the label, said, "Oh, this is terrific. Yeah, you guys should do a whole album." Well, so then we were more collaborative and sent real song ideas back and forth. But those first couple was like, man, I hope this works because
Wow, that is incredible. That's and again, that had to be fun in its own way, frustrating maybe too, but uh, you know,
and Mick is such a nice guy. It's always I've never met him in person, so this is one of those times where you're just sending files back and forth.
yeah,
But
wow.
he's such a nice guy, and it's a real pleasure to work with him. And so again, we just bounce stuff off each other, and hey, let's try this and try that, and great.
It is really great stuff. I put it on, and I didn't know what to expect. You've done a lot of different things, and this had kind of the appearance of it and the name of it, the Roads, kind of made me think maybe a country thing.
Oh,
Uh, not so much. And I put it on, and I was like, wow, this just like really rocks, and it's like so put together and finished, and
hey,
sound is
I was
great.
going to say one of the things that I'm proud of is the guitar sound. And the president of the
Yeah.
label said, "Gee, you got a great guitar sound. You don't sound like anybody else." And I said, "Well, I've been working on it for 50 years, but I built my own tube amplifiers to use, and I use those for Alliance as well because I love the Boston sound, but I don't want the Boston sound for the Rhodes or for Alliance. I want my own sound. So I built my own tube amps.
Man.
And so that makes me really proud too. That that's my sound. Nobody else can get that because those are my amps.
Yeah, and that's got to be part, like, Tom rubbing off, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a background are you an MIT guy?
No,
Okay,
but I did take electronics in high school. Uh,
okay.
in college, I was in the music department. And of course, I didn't want to go to college. I just wanted to be a rock musician, right? But my dad said, well, do whatever you want to do in life, but go to school to learn how to do it. Of course, I said, oh, Dad, well, they don't teach rock in college. He said, but he teaches music. And so if you love music, you should go. And so he drove me over to make me enroll. I said, okay, yeah, enroll. And so I was in the regular counterpoint, theory, harmony classes, but also some vocal groups, like the big choir and then a
Yeah.
chamber chorale. And one of the kids sitting next to me in the choir was Johnny Cola, who went on to play with Huey Lewis and the News.
Okay. Yeah, yeah,
So, and I loved going to school, and it wasn't because the teachers were so young and hip. They
yeah.
were old guys, but they were so enthusiastic that it was just infectious. I just
Yeah.
loved doing it, and so that's my advice to young kids because they think, "Oh yeah, I'm going to drop out of school and be a rock star." I said, "No,
Right.
no, go to school, learn whatever you can."
Yeah.
Anyway, but I was always interested in electronics. I digress here. And built my own stuff because there's always got to be somebody in the band that knows how to fix cables.
Yeah, no
My
doubt.
guitar cord isn't working. So I was that guy.
That's just great, and I mean that, and like you say, you're proud of that, and you should be, because that's you're really gonna get your own sound when you do stuff like that. It's really, really cool. And I think about all of this stuff that you have and all this great music you've given us. Um, is there a piece of music that sits closest to you? Something that you would want to represent Gary Pihl? Say, to present one piece that you would present to somebody and say, this is who I am.
Wow.
It's
Oh,
tough. There isn't one piece.
I guess we kind of tend to think of a body of work.
Right.
You know, uh, again, before I joined Sammy's band, I was in this band Crossfire with the Froome brothers.
Yeah.
For a while, we backed up Norman Greenbaum, Spirit in the Sky.
Yeah.
And so we've learned a lot. I've learned a lot, certainly from that experience, because he was a really good singer-songwriter.
Hmm.
And then again, working with the Froome brothers, they were such great musicians. And again, like no ego involved. Like let's just make the song good. So, and then again, working with Sammy, again, so spontaneous, but again, so enthusiastic about what he's doing. So I've really been so lucky to be at the right place at the right time with other great musicians. So
Yeah.
I've learned something all along the way. And of course, you probably read my bio. When I was in high school, I was in a band, and the other guitar player in the band said, "Hey, I'm taking lessons from this guy in the next town over." This is again the San Francisco Bay Area.
Right.
He's a great guitar player. We should all take lessons from him. And I said, "Okay, great, I'll go down there." So we started taking lessons from this guy, and he was in a band called the Warlocks, and we went to see him play at a pizza parlor, and we were too young. Like his mom drove us there because we were too young. But it was a pizza
Uh,
parlor, so we could get in to see him. And so we were taking lessons from him for just a short time because then they changed the name of the band to the Grateful Dead, and that was
yep.
Jerry Garcia giving us lessons.
Unbelievable, man. Unbelievable.
And
Wow.
when I was in Jerry's little studio over in the corner, because you mentioned country, over in the corner, there was a banjo. And I'm thinking, banjo? That's not very rock and roll. What's that doing here? And
Uh,
I said, whose banjo is that? And Jerry said, well, that's mine. I love bluegrass. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I guess you don't need to just focus in on just rock. You can play
right.
all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Man. And that maybe the best lesson that he taught you,
Yeah,
just to venture out and broaden your horizons.
right.
Wow. Just, and what an amazing player, Jerry,
Yeah,
just for what he did, and, you don't think of him, as this massive guitar hero guy a lot of times, but, you listen to that stuff and much like you're playing actually, there's so many of these things that go on, and it's just so intricate and detailed and perfect in the song, just really really great, and it makes perfect sense listening to the Alliance record that there's some Jerry in there for
yeah.
sure,
Probably.
for
But yeah,
sure.
he and I would not be confused with shredders. With
Right,
that's
right.
not us.
And but it's and those are, you can play fast and do that and be great. But there, it's kind of the notes you don't play. It's the David Gilmour thing where one note rings out and it changes your life.
Yeah.
So it's all of those things, very important. And we get all of that with you. It's great.
Yeah.
Uh, Ever think about telling your story, an autobiography, a book?
Yeah, yeah. My wife keeps telling me I should do that.
You have to have a ton of stories for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I certainly have a few. So I suppose maybe at some point I will, but not
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah. Did you ever keep a journal or anything? Write things
No,
down? No, no.
no, no, never did.
It's all up there though, isn't it?
I do remember a lot.
Yeah, it's pretty great. It's pretty. I'd love to read it for sure. And your story is great. I sit here just outside of Chicago, and I know you were born here or raised
Yeah,
here.
yeah. Park
Yeah.
Ridge.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
What part you're in?
I'm in Naperville.
Naperville. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Born in Park Ridge, and then we moved out to Mount Prospect.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Uh,
very close.
Unfortunately, my parents got divorced, and then I moved in with my dad in Park Forest on the southern side.
Yep. Yep.
And then I had a choice to live with my father or my mother, who had moved on to California. And I said, "Oh, I want to go to California." Sorry, Dad. I love my dad, but I'm going to California.
Wow.
And
And
she
that
was, I was going to say, she was working in an office. She was a secretary in an office and worked with another woman who was a transplant. She came out from New Jersey. And my mom came home from work one day and said, oh, gee, Adele's son is, a guitar player too. I said, yeah, yeah, everybody plays guitar.
Right.
He stayed in New Jersey. He's got a band back there. Great. Yeah, okay, yeah, yeah. And so years later, my mother says to me, well, didn't Adele's son do well in the music biz? I said, oh, yeah, yeah, the woman you work with, the office there. I said, yeah, Adele. What was her last name? Yeah, Adele Springsteen.
No way. Oh my God.
So I'm
Wow.
telling this to my dad, and I'm saying, oh, Dad, you'll never believe this. And he says, well, I work with Jay Giles' father. It's like, what are the odds of that?
Unbelievable. It's, and I guess your odds go up when you're in California. There's a few more out there. Wow. That's just wow.
That
Pretty
or
great.
Nashville.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah, that's what your story is all around incredible. It's really a homegrown American dream kind of thing that, and you've worked hard to make it that, and it's you should be very proud, and it's great. All those records behind you, and that there's a lot of hard work in there for sure. Uh, you got anything else that you want to do? Anything like a bucket list that you've always wanted to do, you haven't had a chance yet?
Well, again, actually, the president of the record label asked if I wanted to do a solo album. And I said, well, I feel like I'm doing everything I want to uh, now with these other bands. Obviously, Alliance is great. I love working with those guys. I love working
Right.
with the Rhodes, Boston. I can't complain. But, along the way, I have written some songs with some other people and done some stuff that I would like to see the light, have them see the light of day. One of our drummers from Boston, Doug Huffman, and I wrote some songs together, and we used our singer, Brad Delp, to sing on them. So we've got a couple of songs that we wrote that I think are really good that Brad is singing.
Wow.
So I'd love to have those end up on a record. And of course, the guy at the label said, "Yeah, sure." Yeah.
Of course.
And and here's another sad story. Uh, when I was putting together Alliance, uh, we were trying on other people, and one of the guys we tried out was Bruce Day, who was from Pablo Cruz, not with us anymore. And we wanted to have a female singer. And so, through my buddy Paul Taylor, who was with Alice Cooper and Winger,
Singer. Yeah.
his girlfriend was Amy Cannon. And they split up and she went and joined Motley Crue. And
Okay.
so for a while there, we were putting that band together with Amy singing. And so we've got some tapes of her singing. Again, she sadly is no longer with us
Yeah.
anymore. But I said, I'd love to have, use some of those songs that these people were on that, unfortunately aren't with us anymore, but
Yeah.
I still think they're great songs. So
Man.
and they're already done. So it's not like I have to do anything. They're done.
Yeah, yeah, that's an easy one. Yeah. And it would be a great a tribute to their lives,
Right.
that's because I think we all want to hear those great voices again, that would be really cool. Yeah, put that into motion. That's there's a lot of people out here that would really love to hear that for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Man, Gary, I can't tell you what a pleasure this has been. It's a dream come true. I've listened to your music for so long, and I've seen your name on all those records, and to have you here is a great honor. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Scott, for taking the time to talk to me.
Yeah, and will we see Alliance doing live shows? Is that possible?
I hope so. Of course, the record label is from Italy, and
Right.
they have those festivals in Europe in the summertime.
Yeah.
I'd love to be on one of those. We're not going to headline. There are plenty of bigger bands than us out there, but I'd love to be on one of those shows. And of course, Dave and I played a million shows together with Sammy.
Right.
Robert and Dave and I have played shows with Robert's charity band, December People.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know about that, where we play
Mhm.
traditional holiday songs, but in the styles of classic rock bands.
Yeah. It's
And
cool.
every gig we do is a benefit for usually a local food bank. Anyway, we've done a bunch of shows together, so we've all played together live. So
Yeah,
we know we can rock. Like, yeah, just give us the stage, we'll go.
it's so
So
cool.
I would love to do that. To and just because we've only done a few gigs here as Alliance, but I would love to do some
Right.
more.
Yeah, well, so would I love you to do some more. It'd be great. Yeah, come and come back to town here. The old hood, and
Yeah.
yeah, it would be great. Yeah, if you ever put something together, a tour or something, please come back. I would love to talk to you some more.
Well, thank you so much. And if you see that we're coming through town with whatever band I'm in, let me know. I'd love to meet you in person and shake your hand.
Fantastic. It sounds so great. Thank you, Gary. Thank you so much for your time and your candor and all the stories. It's just a real honor. Thank you so much.
Well, you're quite welcome, and thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
All right. Bye.